Welcome to the Pause Podcast, where we delve into the stories and experiences that shape individuals and, in turn, shape the world around them. In each episode, we hit the pause button to explore the unique tapestry of personal narratives, resilience, and growth. Join us as we connect the threads from the sections of our Pause newsletter to the rich stories that embody the essence of our community. Discover the extraordinary stories of everyday people, thought leaders, and change makers, all contributing to the evolving narrative of inclusive leadership and personal transformation. So hello, my beautiful, beautiful one. It is such a delight to have you join me. And as I was saying to you just before we started recording, Ayamara is not with us today. She's off at another engagement, and she's just like really, really sad that she's going to miss this live piece, but she'll definitely get to see the recorded version. So thank you so much for joining us, Rhonda. And as we shared with you, we're just going to have a conversation about you, your work with Career Trek, but I know that you didn't just wake up one morning and boom, you're at Career Trek. It's a journey. And so why don't you share maybe a little bit about your own personal journey and sort of how it's influenced your passion for social justice, commitment, just really helping individuals and communities.
Oh, well, thank you. And I want to thank you for having me, for the invitation. I feel extremely honored and humbled to be one of your guests on Pause. So thank you for that. I think, to share some of my personal journey, it does go back to how I was raised. And I was raised by a single mom, and a single mom who she did it all. My sister and I were young when she decided and made the decision that divorce was the best option for her at a time when divorce was like a no-no. My paternal grandparents were Catholic and staunch Catholic, and so having any kind of divorce or black mark on the family was an issue for them. And it was also an issue for my mom in the neighborhood because she was looked at as, oh, the single mom is going to come and take my husband. Like all of that. Despite all of that, my mom still made the decision to divorce my dad because it was the best thing for her and it was the best thing for her children. My mom was married young. At 18, she left school early and started her family and didn't know how to drive and was a stay-at-home mom because my dad was the one that was
the breadwinner, right?
Right. Yep. And his job required him to travel and be gone, and it just wasn't working. When my mom made that decision, she had to learn how to drive because she had little kids that she needed to get to school, and she wanted to make sure that we knew how to swim so we were safe. And then she needed a job, and so she went and found herself a job. And her other piece that was really important to her in raising my sister and I is that she didn't want us to have to move because we couldn't afford where we were. And so she worked extremely hard to keep the house that we moved into and I grew up in, that she's now paid off and still lives in. She's the reason I am who I am. She made a really hard decision at a difficult time, regardless of what the consequences to her were. She fought really hard. And I can only imagine how hard she fought to pay for our house and make sure that we ate and to make sure that we had swimming lessons and to make sure we had birthday parties and holidays, right? Like I can't even imagine, what she did to do that. And so I watched that as a kid, and I watched it as a teenager, although maybe I watched less when I was a teenager.
Oh, teenagers kind of watch less.
Doing a few other things, but whatever.
Totally understand that. Yeah, but especially as a kid, and to tell you the truth of what you're saying, even in those teen years, I have a sneaky feeling you were still watching, but it just wasn't cool to be like, yeah, as a teenager, I was no, but I think you were watching. Yes.
Yes, yes, I was. And then of course, as an adult, and my mom really was a demonstration of independence of, you know, as a woman, you can do it. It might be hard, but you can figure it out and you can do it. Um, and so I think it's her that's really given me the drive to do the things I've done in my career. I think, seeing sort of the struggle behind the scenes to see um, things like, and I have this very vivid memory, and I'll share this. So when we were younger, we used to go to church, and I remember sitting in church with my mom, knowing that there was not a lot of money to be had, knowing that she worked hard for every penny.
Mhm.
Um, and when the collection plate came around,
Mm,
she couldn't give.
mm,
She just couldn't because she needed it
mm,
for her kids. And and after that, there was an issue with us being in church.
mm.
Um, and so we stopped going.
I don't blame you. I'm sorry to say it. I would make that statement. Imagine,
So we
imagine.
stopped going. Like my mom was one of the people that needed the help, but yet that was overlooked and they still wanted her money on the plate. Um,
That does something to a young child's psyche. Like it does something to an adult's psyche when you witness something like that, but to a young child, imagine what that has done to just like your
right.
mindset, your heart. Because, yeah, it's a community where the teachings are we're all one, we're one community, we're made out of love, and we're here for each other, right? You know, all the rhetoric that is said. And for you to witness that and for your mom to experience that, that's shattering.
Yeah. So, it's those things. And I think when I look back sort of at my career and my life, it's like this is, I think, why I've ended up on the path that I have, right? I mean, at the time I wasn't saying, this is an inequity, this is unfair, this is unjust, this is
Mhm.
not right, right? Like, but I saw those things and then continued to see those things in school, around me, in university, in sort of whatever. And again, when I look at sort of where my career path has taken me, I've always been drawn to that place where, um, is there somebody else who needs just some extra support? Not like pity party support,
No,
right? But
no.
is there is there is there something that I can offer to help make things
Yeah.
easier for others? Is there a piece that of the puzzle that I can, you know, provide, assuming the person wants it and is open to it, to then help make things better? And so when I was going through university, um, well, actually, I took a year off after high school,
Mm.
or
How did
going
she
to,
respond to that when you mentioned to your mom, I'm going to take a year off high school? How did she respond?
it was fine. I mean, I was the first in my family to go to university. Um, I also had to pay for it,
Mhm.
because we didn't have the means. And, my mom made me a deal. She's like, if you can work and pay your tuition and your books, you are more than welcome to stay at home and live for free. And I'll continue to provide those things that you need to have a space to live, but I cannot pay for
Right.
post-secondary. So part of it was I had to work to make the money. Um, and the other part of it is that I didn't really know what I wanted to do. Um, I remember actually when I was doing grade 12 graduation, you had to fill out a form and, what's your name so they could read it, as you're walking across the stage. And then one of the questions was, so what's your plan after university? What do you want to be? Blah, blah, blah. And I handed it in blank because I honestly
Oh,
didn't know. Like I didn't know.
yeah.
They gave it back to me and said, well, you have to fill it out. You have to put something because
Oh,
we have
man.
to
Talk about
read,
pressure.
right? We have to read something as you walk across the stage.
Oh,
And I'm like, I don't social worker. Okay, I'll put social. I knew I didn't want to be a teacher, so I knew that. but I put social worker, but it was a lie. I didn't want to be a social worker. So, Rhonda Wozni walking across the stage, grade 12 grad, she's going to be a social worker in her life. Yay. I'm like, no, but
That's not
whatever.
me.
Oh, and I know we need social workers, but it was just not me.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
so I took a year off and I did work. And even when I went back, I didn't really know what I wanted to do, but I was interested, I think in working with kids in some way, but again, not as a classroom teacher.
Yeah.
Um, and so, one of the plans was, eventually it was like, oh, well, maybe speech language pathology would be something I would be interested in. And again, sort of helping kids, you know, um, navigate language so that they could participate in school and, not
So
be
deep
looked
for you to
at differently.
think like that. Seriously, how did you, Rhonda, came, first of all, because you're the first in your family to have gone to university at that time.
Mhm.
So then where did you get the role modeling that you could even go to university? You know what I mean?
Um, I don't even, I'm not really sure. I think it was just more, I heard conversation in high school that was the next step that you were supposed to take after grade 12.
Yeah.
I'm like,
That's how I went myself. I heard that after high school, you go to
right,
university.
right. I was like, okay, sure.
Okay.
Um,
You had
so
fun, you know?
yeah. So I think it was that. But my mom always supported whatever I wanted to do, right? She just wanted us to graduate, have a good job. She wanted things to be easier for us,
Mhm.
right, than it was for her.
Yeah.
So that was always there. But yeah, I think it was just people were talking about that's what you should do, right? Here's the next step on the ladder or the next point in the line or
Mhm.
whatever it
I
was.
want to pause you here,
Yeah,
unintended or maybe not.
yeah, perfect.
You said so many incredible things about your upbringing and your mom. And I noticed the emotions are still there when you're talking about her and what she went through. And what I'm noticing, it's not even what my sister and I had to go through. I'm hearing a lot about what my mom had to go through so that my sister and I could, right, learn how to swim, have a little bit of a better life than sort of what
Mhm.
your mom had after being divorced. And so when I listen to your story, it actually chokes me up because that is my mother's story. The
Mhm.
only
Mhm.
thing is she had 4 times as many children. There were 8 of us, right?
Mhm.
So not to tell my story, but it's something I can really connect to you on and about, and it's why I feel the emotions that come up. Because when I talk about my own mom, I get choked, Rhonda.
Mhm. Mhm.
It's like, and I don't know, you're a tall person because I've seen you live, but my mom is all of 5'2". Like, is your mom
Yeah,
a tall person? Is she short
no,
too?
like she's 5'2". Like she fits under my armpit, right? Like, she's little.
They are like a force to be
Yeah,
with.
yeah. I would not want to mess with my mom. I tried as a teenager and I lost.
Oh man, that is powerful. So then, as you're saying, this kind of conditioning, because we're really being conditioned. That's just what's happening, deliberately as well as unconsciously being conditioned. And so I'm not surprised that you're in this position that you're in, supporting young folks, right? Developing, building, growing, developing their leadership skills, and so on. And so maybe, if you don't mind, why don't you tell me a little bit about, let's kind of transition into the TRC, because we know that involves a
Mhm.
lot of trauma, young people being taken away from their homes and their communities, parents not having that opportunity to raise their children. So what's that been like for you in terms of engaging with truth and reconciliation processes, and again, just really shaping
your views or your perspective on fostering an inclusive community or inclusive communities, depending on where you go?
Yeah, and journey of truth and reconciliation has been an interesting one, right? Because it wasn't until I was an adult until I truly knew and started to know and continue to learn about the history of Canada and Indigenous peoples in Canada and the relationship with the government um, and then knowing what I was taught in school was either blatantly wrong or there was so much omitted. And I
Mhm.
was angry. I was
Mm,
angry about that because I'd been lied to,
mm.
right? About how we are in this space of Canada, right? You know, to your point earlier, we're all the same. We love each other. We care about each other. We do
Well,
these
that's what
things,
the message, right? The
right?
message that they're
Yeah,
sending to us.
right.
Made in the image of God, and we are one. And
Mhm,
yet it sends these conflicting messages, right? Well, how
mhm,
come those people live like that and these ones are and they're contrasting
mhm,
reality, So
mhm.
you're angry, rightly so.
Yeah. Yeah. And so, part of it is, or has been, right, is um, the responsibility I have to take as an individual to learn the truth of Canada and its relationship with Indigenous peoples, to understand how, why, and where we are now. Like, why are we seeing the inequities? Why are we seeing people that need extra support? Why are we seeing people and children who are not being raised by their families, right? To understand that there's a reason for that. It's not like somebody put their hand up and said, I want to be a bad parent today, right?
Exactly.
Like,
Yeah.
nobody chose that, right? So things were done to people to create that environment.
And
um
if I could do another pause, not only were things done to people, the systems are still designed
yeah,
where people are just being beaten down. Like it's just, they continue to be experience these kinds of barriers and obstacles and right. And so people have good intention, as you're saying. Nobody wakes up one day and say, how can I suck today? How can
right.
I really mess up so that I get sent to jail for the next 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, or however many years, or take my kids away from me? No one wakes up wanting that, not at all. So yeah.
No. And so it's sort of trying to learn and um, be aware of those systems that have created the conditions that have made things inequitable for people or have put people at a disadvantage. Um, and so it's that and sort of again, when I look back at it now, right, sort of my own experience with growing up that really drives me or gives me that motivation to try and be a piece of the puzzle, right?
Mhm.
So there's only so much any one person or one organization can do,
Agree.
but if we all come together and work towards the same things, this recognition of systemic barriers and inequities, and what is it that you can offer to help start to take a sledgehammer to those things and put some holes in it, right? Um to be able to, those, is it like the sort of the cumulative effect, right? Sort of those small things,
Nice
those small
snowball,
steps,
right?
right? That are then going to lead. And so who else sort of needs to be on this, journey with us? Who else is working in the space of truth and reconciliation and really gets it, right? I mean, there's people who say I'm working in the space of reconciliation and sort of check the box
Very
and give
performative,
themselves
right? So
a pat on the back,
right,
right?
you've experienced that. And I think that's one of the most damaging things we could do to this whole reconciliation process and the whole healing of our nation, right? This land called Canada, because Indigenous peoples, we know what's been done to them and continue to be done to them. We also know, even my own ancestors, like we've been here. I always kind of say with my hand over my mouth, it was an African who brought Samuel de Champlain here. Most Canadians don't know that. It's not taught to them in schools, right? But nonetheless, Africans been coming to these parts for eons before the land called Canada. And we have established communities. And again, same sort of, really horrible treatments of peoples. We know what's happened to Japanese and just a variety of Asian Canadians, right? On and on it goes. So I'm really glad that you referenced or tied it back to your own upbringing. So knowing what you know now as an adult and learning about the TRC's work and then looking back. So when you look back with this adult, right? You have this adult's perspective and a little bit more learning, right? Some more experience and so on. And you even think back to that example that you shared in church, how rather than a hand or two being extended to your family to support you, the hand was, instead of giving, the hand was slapping, so to speak, right? So when you look back to that, like, what if any thoughts cross your mind? Because I have some thoughts myself. Look back at my own upbringing because it was very similar. Methodist church, and all those kind of things. But yeah, it's just curious if even you think of it that way.
Yeah, I mean, it does come up, and it's interesting that it came up here today, right? Like I haven't thought about it in a long time, but when you asked the question, it was an immediate memory, right? Of experience. And again, like I say, I wasn't calling it inequity at the time, but
And have the vocabulary, right?
yeah, but I see it now as, my family had this experience. I know other families are having this experience. So again, what piece do I have or can I offer to try and lessen the impacts of those experiences or make them less, or is there a piece that I can offer in terms of resources or access to other services or programs to help people overcome, or I don't know, right? Like I always, this reference for me and the way I work and think about things is this is a piece of the puzzle I have to offer. If people are open to that, I would love to add it to the puzzle. If they're not, that's okay, right? And so it's really about, how can my experience either as a child or as an adult in the places that I've worked be of assistance to others to overcome similar experiences or even more significant experiences, right? I mean, I do want to say, because people can't see me, as I am white, and so my experiences, even though I shared that story of growing up, there are other experiences that I have not had because I'm white.
Absolutely.
And so, I want to be able to say that because people can't see me. So, and recognizing that, right? So when I do the work that I do and connect with communities that are Indigenous, Black, or other racialized communities, I'm mindful that I'm coming in as a white person, and how people respond to me because of that is how they're going to respond, right? And it's
you have no control over that, but you
No.
have control over, as you said, this awareness of your own privilege, your own experiences that help to shape you where you are today, both the good and the not so good. And then, having, I'm going to say again, maybe there was a moment, and maybe help me with this. Was there like a time, Rhonda? Because for myself, I'm a very, very outgoing person. So for people who don't know me, that's what they think I am, is this very extroverted, outgoing, talkative person. I love to talk, by the way, but not all the time. and love silence, love to go inward and just retreat inside. And I do a lot of thinking inward in the forest, like to go for my walks and do that. So I'm just wondering if there were moments in your life, like over the years, when you, and maybe you would have the answer looking back, because when we're doing it, we're not sometimes not fully aware that we're doing
Right.
it. Was there like a period in your life where you realized, hey, I seem to be doing a lot more thinking? I call it pausing, like really
Mhm.
pausing, pondering, reflecting, like was there anything like that for you?
There was, and again, it was more in my adult years, and I would say sort of late 20s, early 30s, when I really started paying attention to um, things that were starting to come out about um, colonization and residential schools and the 60s scoop and that kind of thing. And um, it really did stop me in my tracks for a
Mhm.
bit, because I think part of it was shock in hearing about that whole system of colonization and the policies that were put in place by governments. And um,
I see you struggle because you know what is
yeah.
happening? It creates this cognitive dissonance. It's like you're discombobulated because remember, we trust our elders. We trust these people who are our teachers, spiritual leaders, community members, heads of the council, whomever, all the folks who have power and authority. And if they tell us particular stories, a certain set of stories, who are we to not believe those stories as, say, younger folks growing up?
Mhm.
You're going to believe them. And so and you and I, we've done work with each other, my organization with your organization, and we've had these talks around anti-racism practices and so on. And we have seen the impact that it's had on some of the participants. It's like, well, I grew up very poor. Like, how can I have privilege? I have
Mhm.
no privilege, right? So said, like a white person. And it's this not understanding the full stories that help us or got us all to where we are today. So I totally understand this. It's a massive challenge to find words, right? To describe what you're feeling, thinking, because it's all coming in at once. Everything is like, whoa. And
Mhm.
so yeah, very disconfabulating. For me, that's the word
Yeah,
that,
yeah,
yeah.
it is. And then once I sort of kind of got over it a little bit, and I'm using air quotes because I don't know that I'm over it yet.
I don't know if we'll ever get over it fully, right?
Right, right. And I honestly don't think we should,
No.
in my opinion, right? Because there's still
Agree.
things that are happening to people as a result of certain policies and the history of colonization and all of those things, right?
Yes.
Like that's not gone away. It's not like, okay, 10 years, right? Like it's today.
Mhm.
Um, so when I sort of, got myself righted, it was about, okay, well, I need to learn more. Where do I get that information? How do I put myself in places where people are talking about these things? Holy crap, that was super uncomfortable, but did I ever learn a lot, right?
Suppose.
And right. And when I first sort of started this path, I would get really defensive, right?
Mhm.
Because there was lots of things being said about white people and, right?
Well, you
And so
feel
I used,
the fingers are pointing at you,
yeah,
right?
yeah, yeah.
And here's an interesting piece, because you and I think we talked about this in one of the sessions that I had done with your organization,
Mhm,
wherein white people are not socialized to see and think of themselves as being white.
mhm,
An unspoken agreement that you're white, and it comes with a set of privileges.
mhm,
And then there are others. So the othering of fellow
mhm,
humans
mhm,
who now have varying degrees of lightness all the way down to, say, my ancestors who are the darkest
Mhm.
of skin color on this planet. So all of a sudden, these folks now are racial. So that's why the word racialized came about. It's you racialize these other people and they are ethnic. Well, whiteness, we don't identify and say we're white, but it's unspoken. We have this unspoken agreement that we're white and that we're not ethnic. But then if the others are racialized and ethnic, then white must also be racial. And I'm putting it air quotes too, because white, black, yellow, brown, they're all social constructs. They're all made up to classify people for the purpose of exploitation, taking people's resources, and really dehumanizing people, right? Just for the gain of one group over another. So these are some of the knowings, and I can understand and really empathize with you because I too, I thought I was a Jamaican. And when I emigrated to Canada, it was my fourth year in the country, and I'm at the University of Manitoba, and I'm getting ready for my internship program, which I wanted to apply for to become a dietitian, right? I'm so excited. I'm a really good student, blah, blah, blah. And when I asked one of my professors if they would stand as a referee for me, I might have shared this story before, but long and short of the story is the professor said, sure, but I don't think you'll like what I have to say. And I literally thought she was thinking because I was too young. So I didn't say anything, right? And I guess I knew how to kind of just hold this space. And then she didn't say anything after. And I said, so what do you mean by that, Professor? So, and no word of lie, pulled her sleeves up and did this, rubbed her finger, right? I had no idea what she meant, Rhonda.
Yeah.
None. And it took a few seconds for me to say, do you mean because of my skin, like the color of my skin? I didn't know what she meant because where I came from, we're Jamaicans.
Right.
I came here to learn I was Black. And Black now is this social, economic, colonial title that comes with a lot of garbage. Didn't know it. So like you, head spin, right?
Yeah.
So I
Yeah.
can hear you when you say you were defensive, you felt the anger, you felt like the fingers were pointing at you. Absolutely.
Yeah. Yeah. And then as I continued, it's like it's not about me, right? It's about this system that's been created. And so then what role and responsibility do I have to be in that space to work towards, again, removing barriers or offering, a piece that can help, remove some of those obstacles. But then also learning, right? Like there's a whole history that needs to be relearned, retaught,
100%.
right?
Yeah.
Like, and we're not there yet because I have a kid in high school and I know what she's taking. And she's said to me, she's like, Mom, I am so tired of learning about old white dudes.
Oh my gosh, that's coming from a young child. So
Yeah.
it's, the systems take a long, long time. It's like this big ship. So you have this massive ship. You don't just go like this with the steering wheel and it changes course, right? It takes a
But
long time, but I tell you, we're losing lives in the process. And I think this is a nice segue to you now and your work that you're doing with youth and these youths who are facing racialized barriers. Like, what are some of your own aspirations that you hold for? You mentioned your child in school. This is a young person. Chances are they're sitting beside someone who's racialized because Canada is, what is it, 25, pushing close to 30% racialized people. It's not all white anymore. So what are, if any, what are those aspirations that you have for these youths?
I think I think the biggest thing that I think about and I think that I'm excited about cautiously is that we are talking about this more openly now. We're talking more openly about the need for equity, the need for inclusion, and for folks to belong. Whereas before, like there was not a conversation to be,
Taboo, right?
right? So that does give me some hope, right? That as, kids are growing up, you hear of, companies and businesses and governments using these words more often than I've ever heard. Yes, people are talking about it still in, we need a DEI strategy. Maybe at some point we get away from calling it a strategy, and this is just the way we work, right? It's
I
embedded
love
in
that.
embedded in our policies. This is just how we do business. I don't want to say it's not a big deal, because it is, because we still need to make people mindful of it, right? So I get that's why people are talking about investing in strategies and those kinds of things. That's a step. And so I'm just glad that that step is being taken,
I
and
am.
that there's some consciousness
Mhm.
around that, instead of either completely ignoring it or sweeping it under the rug and just being
We've
oblivious.
done that, right? We've had hundreds of years of
Yeah,
that
yeah,
happening.
yeah.
Now the little buggers under the
Yeah,
rug are starting to crawl
yeah.
out, right? So have to air it
And
out.
I love that my kid is saying, I don't want to talk about white dudes anymore. So
Mm.
she knows there's more to what's going on around her than what her curriculum is currently teaching her
Mhm,
right now,
mhm, mhm.
right? Yeah.
That is really a very, very encouraging and hopeful statement coming from, how old is your child?
She's 17 now, but she probably first said this to me when she was 14.
There you go. So that's powerful on many, many levels. And I'm always seeing maybe there's some impact of mom and mom's work and how mom, right? Just like how your mom impacted you, you never know, right? So yeah, no, that's powerful. So maybe as you also think about kind of going through this balance between, we have to have hope, right, Rhonda? We can't be pessimistic, and I do this work, as you know, it's work that I say I want to put myself out of work. Like
Right.
there's no more work for me to do in this area. You can, I
Yep.
don't want to be doing this work. So which means that we would have achieved that state where, as you said earlier, DEI principles and practices are just what we do. They're just embedded in the policies or practices or procedures and so on. So talk to me a little bit about navigating the balance between optimism and really acknowledging rather that we still have these systemic challenges. And especially when you think back to your work at Career Track, looking at your strategic planning and so on, how do you balance the two, optimism against systemic challenges? It's kind of a big
Okay.
question, but
How much time do you have?
how much time do you have?
Um, yeah, I mean, yeah, yeah, it's almost hard to put it in words, right? Because these two things are sort of coexisting at the same time, right? Like it's not so much that, there's naivety to the fact that there's still these systems that need to be changed, um, without that having to take away from the optimism that we want to feel, that we want to experience, that we see, happening in some of our programs, right? Where actually I was just in Brandon on the weekend ahead of the storm, which I will say was quite
Good.
nice. But I had a family come up to me at the end and just say, I want to thank you for doing what you do for our kids. And the biggest piece for them, granted, they liked that there was career exploration and the kids were on campus and they were having those experiences. But the biggest piece for them was that we were able to provide safe transportation for their kids to get to and from the program, because they were not in a place to be able to do that.
Oh,
And if we hadn't have provided it, their child wouldn't have been able to participate. And so they said, we love all that stuff, but the fact that you got my child home and to programming safely each and every time was a huge benefit to our family.
let's pause on that.
Sure.
Seriously, that is so powerful because I really wasn't expecting to hear that as one of the reasons why they're valuing the work that Career Track and you are doing, right? And again, it's why, going back to what you're saying, that we should never ever get over this whole need for DEI, because we tend to forget certain things. Like, we take having transportation for granted, and it's a privilege for some people. And that's the difference between a young person being able to access programs like what you're offering, rather than being denied that opportunity to go and explore careers, learn, make amazing connections. Like, no, that's pause worthy. Pause worthy.
Yeah, it was I mean, I know we do that in our programming, but like you said, it wasn't what I was expecting to hear. And so it did actually in that moment make me pause and go, okay, again, this is why we do what we do. And everybody takes something different from that experience in terms of defining the benefit and the impact of it, right? And so, you know, and then there's sort of the system thing, right? But it's also this access to as well, right? So if that piece was not there and not part of what we were able to offer, that family never would have been involved, because both parents are working on the weekend, or one is working on the weekend and the other is home with the younger children. And the
And maybe
person
have one vehicle, if any,
one
right?
or zero. Yeah.
One or
Right.
zero.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
again, a powerful example of why it is so important, the kind of work that you and Career Track are doing, because this is a perfect, story that speaks to equity versus equality. So the program could be designed where it's for all people, young people between the ages of X and X. You are welcome. Come and join us. But not thinking it through far enough to say, well, how do we make it equitable? Like, right? And that is what happened here. It's goosebump. Like, I'm getting goosebumps just hearing this story. Yeah. Wow, this is so important, what we're doing here. So important. Yeah. So, so then in terms of optimism, I'm going to go out on a limb here and say you're pretty optimistic about things looking up, but we know you're being also realistic that, again, sometimes we'll take a few steps forward and we might have to falter one or two back, but then we can leap forward a little bit more. And it's that forward movement that I'm thinking, but I'll let you speak to that rather than me putting words in your mouth or trying to put words in your mouth.
Those are good words. I'll take those ones. I'm not going
to take them.
I do tend to lean more to the optimistic side of things. I don't know if that's like a coping mechanism or a mechanism of some sort that keeps the passion and the drive going for what we do here at Career Track. And I've spent the bulk of my career in the not-for-profit sector, and I think that's on purpose. For lots of reasons, but what was your question again?
Well, leaning more towards optimism.
Optimism. Yeah.
And I think that's what you're saying is that.
Yeah. But I mean, like I don't, I know that there's still a ton of hard work that needs to be done. And so again, as one person or as an organization, where can we situate ourselves in those conversations to raise awareness about what we're seeing in our programming, and why it's important and how it's supporting families. Like, it's not just supporting the child that's in the program, right? I mean, they're our primary beneficiary for sure, but there's a family behind that child. There's adults behind, there's maybe siblings behind, maybe not, right? But there's so many other folks.
Husbands, there's families, like it can pan out.
Yes.
And I was at an event 2 or so Fridays ago as part of the Black History Month celebrations, and this was held at the Canadian Museum for Human Rights. Quick story, there was the screening of a movie that was done featuring immigrants brought in from the Caribbean to Canada, and they came in under the domestic workers programs, you're probably familiar with it.
Yep.
And one of my community moms, so not my biological mom, but my community mom, she's an elder. She's an octogenarian actually right now. Yeah. And still a massive advocate. Like she still types up and sends emails, right? So
Love it.
she's featured in that film, and she talked about her first year. She was at Wellington Crescent working for a family, a white family, of course, and the loneliness and the pain and the this and the that. So it was a beautiful film that showed you just kind of go through the roller coaster of emotions, right? So CBC asked me to comment on it, and one of the things I said is similar to what you just said. The workers benefited in the sense that those who stayed got the opportunity to bring their families here. And I know for me, my sister was a domestic worker when she came, and it's how I ended up here. But my trajectory in Canada is vastly different from hers. I came, boom, straight into school and university and professionalism, nothing like that for my sister. So to your point, the child benefits, but I know it fans out. And what I said to CBC is exactly that. When communities thrive, so if you allow for Black Canadian communities, African Caribbean Canadian communities to thrive, Canada is going to thrive. The
Mhm.
province that we live in will thrive. The city, the right, the communities. It's just this massive snowballing positive effect. So
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. And I think, younger kids, because there's more conversation around this, are going to have more knowledge and resources behind them to continue to push that forward, right? And it may not be, my, or our generation that'll see huge shifts, but I do think it's that young people that, um, are hearing people talk more about truth and reconciliation and equity and inclusion that
Yeah.
are going to be the ones that are really gonna shake things up.
Oh, and they are, I tell you, I am seeing some things in social media and so on. And I even look at some of my younger nieces, and
Mhm.
I'm like, man, I wish I had that wisdom and insight when I was their age. You know? I'm only kind of getting a little bit of it now in
Right,
my older years.
right. Yes,
So
yes.
moving forward, then, what are you excited about as you think about Rhonda and career track and looking sort of like to the future, right, with you?
Mhm.
What are you excited about?
I think one of the things I'm excited about, certainly from a career track standpoint, is we've made some changes to our program delivery model. Um, Thank you, COVID. I will attribute that to COVID, because honestly, I don't know that if the pandemic would have happened, if we would have even been thinking about or considering a change to our program delivery model, right? So prior to the pandemic, it was a model that, we had kids, get on a school bus every Saturday, take them to post-secondary campuses for 20 Saturdays in a row, do their thing, right? And it was all really wonderful and fabulous, and it's why we are who we are today. What we learned in the pandemic, because we had to, is that we were able to take a completely in-person program and shift it to a virtual environment and still have success.
Mm, mm,
Coming out of that, we have returned to in-person programming, but the way in which people are, again, sort of quote unquote, coming out of COVID is very different. People, aren't going out the same way. They're maybe not gathering in large groups the same way, or maybe they're not wanting to leave, sort of the areas where they're comfortable. And so one of the things, we've done is we've taken our programming to where people are, right?
mm.
As opposed to, hey, you got to come to us and get on our bus and,
Right,
we'll take
right.
you
Mm,
gigs. We have enough, you know, programming wherewithal and resources to be able to pack things up and bring that experience to people. And we can do that in places like Winnipeg. We can do it in Thompson where we're working. But then the other thing that it's also allowed us to do is to go into rural and remote Indigenous communities and take our programming to places where kids wouldn't necessarily have access to our programming for all kinds of reasons. They don't live close to Brandon, Thompson, or Winnipeg. They don't have transportation, even if they were closer, or do you know what I mean? So
I
you know,
do. Oh,
we're 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 making more of a concerted effort
mm,
to be as accessible as possible. And if that means we have to go to people with our stuff,
mhm, mhm.
we can do that. We can
Mm.
do um
I
yeah.
would be excited about that too. I'm excited just hearing you talk about it because what it tells me now is if you're in a remote community, a remote northern community that normally they wouldn't be able to come to one of the major cities, then by nature of being there, not only are you putting into that community the knowledge and experience and so on, but let me guess, you probably will be buying something to eat while you're in those communities, right? You're putting dollars back into the communities.
Mhm.
And you now are, again, by virtue of being there, going to be using whatever resources that they have, and then
Mhm.
also grounding it in terms of cultural competency,
Mhm.
because you're in their home. You come into my home, there's
Mhm.
certain ways that right?
Yeah.
I love it. I would be absolutely, I am excited to hear this,
Oh,
Rhonda.
thank you. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's yeah,
Anything else that you want to share? Anything else or?
yeah, you know, I think what I'm excited about is or the other things I'm excited about is that um people are hearing about us a little bit more, right? So, you know, we're 27 or 28 years old, right? And when I first started, people were like, oh, I've never heard of Career Trip before. Tell me more, or, you know, whatever. And now I have people coming to me and saying, hey, heard about what you do. We're trying to do more work, you know, in this particular sector. Is there a way you can help us?
Hmm.
And honestly, even in the last 3 months or so, I've probably had half a dozen conversations like that.
Or,
That I think are a testament to, you know, what we're trying to do, how we're trying to engage with and prepare young people for the future of work, so that, like you said, their families can prosper, their communities can prosper, our province as a whole can prosper, right? That people want to live, work, and spend their life here
absolutely.
in
Yeah.
Manitoba, because the opportunities are there. But if you don't know what you don't know,
You're going to
it's
go
difficult.
look elsewhere, right?
You're
Because
going
you're
to look
not
somewhere else.
you know, on the other side. You'll look elsewhere. How about we make this a
Yeah,
place that you can truly live, work, and play? Because you can. You can.
100%.
That is
100%. I
exciting.
moved away. I moved away from Winnipeg for 4 years, um, and came back. And it was one of the best decisions I ever made.
Yeah, you see, when I immigrated from Jamaica to Winnipeg, I've
Mhm.
never had the honor, privilege, or experience to live in any other communities other than, you know, like a week at a time, 2 weeks or 3 weeks, but like never live, where
Mhm.
my driver's license and everything is reflective of
Right.
no.
Yeah.
So this is it. And I am a little bit fortunate. I get to travel a decent amount, especially pre-COVID for
Mhm.
my work. And honestly, I am always so happy to land back in this city. Like it
Mhm.
has my heart.
Yeah.
This is my home. Like it's been more than 40 years. This
Mhm.
is home. So
Mhm.
I'm
Mhm.
excited with you, right alongside there with you.
Well,
This is
thank you.
our
I'm
home.
glad you're
Yeah.
yeah.
So let's wrap up. Let's do some rapid fire questions. I'm going to ask you a few. No need to think. The first response that comes to mind or heart or gut, however, where you get your
Mhm.
insights, that's
Mhm.
the answer that I want you to go for.
Yeah.
So you do this kind of work, and at times, you know, it can be challenging because never really not knowing what some of the experiences are of some of the young people that
Mhm.
you're working with. And we know that there's a fair amount of trauma that's involved in some of their lives and so on, and it can wear on you. So which would you say is your way of deconstructing at the end of a day that you're kind of happy to see behind you and looking forward to the new day? Like, so how do you kind of pause and take care of yourself? So which would you choose? A nice leisurely walk through the woods, or would you call up a girlfriend and just maybe sip a glass or two of wine or tea or something along those lines? Which one? How do you relax?
I like to relax with the trees. I like to
Mm.
be outside. I do like to be by myself
Mhm.
for periods of
Okay.
time. I always say I'm an extroverted introvert.
That's me.
Yeah.
That's me. That's how I love to unwind after a busy day, whatever just give me the trees. And it's
Yep.
just me and the
Yep.
trees. Love
Yep.
it.
Yep.
Okay, so which would you choose in terms of going on vacation? So something that involves water where you can either go swim, kayak, or, canoe or whatever, or a lovely all-inclusive resort in, say, on a beach somewhere in Jamaica, like one of the nicest places in Jamaica. Which would you choose?
See, I've been to Jamaica and I do know how nice it is there.
You know, I'm
And
not.
then there's water, so I could do the water activities that you described in the first example and combine them both.
Okay, so you're gonna go to Jamaica then and combine the water.
I am, yeah.
Oh, okay, and then the last question is, when you think about reading, what's one piece of work that you, or by someone, a book or whatever, a poem, it doesn't have to be a novel or whatever, anything that you've read that you would say, Rhonda, wow, that changed my life. And even to this day, you still
Hmm.
reference.
Yeah, when you first started asking the question, the first book that came to mind was Braiding Sweetgrass.
Ooh.
Um, Robin, I can't think of her last name, but if you Google it, it's Braiding Sweetgrass. Again, was part of um, the learning, in terms of truth and reconciliation. And she really does a good job of talking about sort of Western knowledge aligned with Indigenous knowledge and how those two things overlap and the importance of that overlap, right? For people to kind of be mindful of both. So yeah, when you first started that question, that was the book that came to mind.
That is amazing. So I will have to go get that book because our last guest or previous guest, Kimberly,
Mm-hmm.
mentioned that that's the book that changed her life as well, if I'm not mistaken. So
So your last guest is a very good friend of mine.
there you go. Oh my goodness. No surprise there, right? I'm going to get the book then because it's two people in a
Yep.
row that's mentioned that book. So finally, here are two parting questions. You get to choose whether you'd like to spotlight a change that may be Career Trek or a sister organization of yours has embarked upon and that they're doing, and you're so happy for them that you'd love to just kind of shine some light on them. Or would you rather exchange a story with us, something that maybe stood out for you or impacted you or so that you want to leave our guests with? That's really, kind of inspired you and sort of help you on this path, Kieran.
I think when I think about sort of this path, this journey that we're on, it's really been about, finding those spaces of like-minded people. Because I think, sort of there's the work of the not-for-profit sector, and then there's the work, required in the space of truth, reconciliation, equity, inclusion, and belonging. And I still think the group of folks, I say folks, but it's organizations, it's whatever, is still small. And in order to do the work and to keep up the work, and to keep up the motivation, to really surround yourself with like-minded people to go, okay, or to give you that sense of, okay, this is why I'm doing this. There's others that are doing this work as well. And yes, it's hard. And yes, it's going to take time. And yes, we have to be patient. But we all get so busy in our day to day that it's sometimes like, oh my gosh, how am I ever going to get anything done? right? How are we ever going to move the needle on anything? So I think, this probably strays a bit away from either of the questions you asked me, but who is that community of people that are also working on that same path? Because there's still a lot of people who are not there yet, right? And some people haven't even started, right? So I think there's still a level and degree of ignorance or denial or refusal or whatever that is called. And then there's people who are maybe just dabbling in it and getting started. And then there's others that are still, really making those efforts. I would like to think Career Trek is in that space of really making those efforts to try and make change, to maybe be an organization that's leading by example, that others can look to for support. And like, how do I get started? Because sometimes for folks it's, I don't even know where to start, so they just don't start at all, right?
Yeah. What
But
would you say to that question? Because I get it. I do this work with organizations, is how you and I met. And sometimes, in the preliminary stages, when we're kind of figuring out, okay, what is it that you'd like to see done? It's, well, how do I get started? Like, what do I do? What would you say to someone here when asking that question?
So a couple of things. One, we've got, two very important documents and calls to action and calls for justice related to the Truth and Reconciliation Commission, as well as the National Inquiry into Missing and Murdered Indigenous Women and Girls. Read those, right? You can start there by reading the calls to action. You can read, the process that the commission went through to gather stories. That stuff is available, right? For you to start doing your own work first before going to somebody and saying, oh, hi, can you tell me about the history in Canada from your perspective as an Indigenous person? Folks have to do that all the time. That is not how you start.
You're burdening them, right?
Yeah, exactly. So there is stuff out there that you can use to get started. And again, once you start to become aware, then you look for those places where who's hosting a webinar, where's the conference that's talking about these things, where are the other sort of courses, even like Indigenous Canada through the University of Alberta. Take that course, right? That's a place to start, right? You got to do some of the legwork, right?
Absolutely. We're responsible for our own learning, and even young children, because we just need to create the environment that's conducive for learning, but we can't make someone learn, but we can create so we're responsible for our own learning. So absolutely in agreement with that. Yeah. Rhonda, this has been amazing. I so support you and Career Trek, the work that you're doing. I am very, very honored to have met you and to continue with this relationship and community that we're building. And I can't thank you enough for coming and chatting with me, sharing your pause moments over the years. And I feel like have gotten to know you a bit more, right? Because there's stories that were shared that I never had the chance for us to hear from each other. So yeah, I'm really looking forward to the response and the feedback from our community regarding this. There are lots and lots of nuggets that you've just laid out here, and it's up to folks which ones they choose to take, or even if they don't take any. But I know for me, you've given me a lot more optimism because, oh my goodness, as the head of an organization, the CEO, you hold quite a bit of responsibility and authority and so on. And to have this degree of commitment for just building stronger communities through young people, and learning, I feel very, very hopeful. So thank you. Appreciate this.
Oh, thank you. Thank you very much. It's been a pleasure and an honor to spend more time with you. You're one of my favorite people, and I've learned so much from you over the time we've had together, and look forward to whatever's next for us.
Oh, looking forward to that for sure.